So it's day 84 of President Trump's 4 to 6 week Iran war. Strait of Hormuz remains closed, which remains a big thorn in the side of the US administration. Meanwhile, there's been reports from the New York Times that Iran and Oman are in negotiations about how tolls might be charged if the Strait of Hormuz was to get opened again, despite President Trump threatening that they shouldn't be negotiating with Tehran and absolutely any such tolls will be completely unacceptable. So why is Oman engaging with Iran on such a sensitive issue? Well, the reports from the New York Times also said that not only were they looking at suggestions for charging tolls, but also for charging for services provided to vessels as they made their way through the strait. Now, the reality is that Oman didn't actually want to get involved in these talks initially, but of course, inevitably, this situation is rather more complicated than it might look from the top. So let's look under international maritime law. A nation is responsible for the waters out to 12 miles from its territory, from its coastline, and that's called its territorial waters. Now, it controls, therefore, anything in the air, on the surface or on the seabed out to 12 miles. Now, the only time that's complicated if another nation is within 24 miles of you, in other words, 2 times 12 miles, in which case a median line is drawn between the two. Now, if we look at the Strait of Hormuz, it varies in size between about 65 miles of width down to about 24 miles. So it really shouldn't be an issue at all. And you should be able to draw a nice simple median line down the middle that gives both Iran and Oman its territorial waters. Now, that would be simple were it not for one additional complication, is that the Strait of Hormuz is littered with lots of little tiny islands. We've shown a few of them here. Now, most of the ownership of these islands is disputed, but the fact is that Iran is a massive country. It doesn't need their territory. This is all about controlling the islands because, under international law, territorial waters would start from the border of these islands that you own. And therefore, if we redraw, now a median line would be much, much closer to the Oman coastline and provide very limited opportunity for Oman to exercise any control over the strait. And therefore, Iran would have de facto control of the strait. In addition to that, if you look at these islands here and zoom in, most of these islands are very small. Most of them are very sparsely, if at all, habitated. But many of them have actually got airfields on and military facilities. And that's just an indication of how seriously Iran takes protecting these islands so that it can maintain control. So what are these talks about between Oman and Iran? Almost certainly is about who owns what and how you might manage the Strait of Hormuz once peace descends again. Meanwhile, across in Sweden, there are NATO talks being conducted. Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, has been very dismissive of these talks, saying that there's no chance of any tolls being charged and it will be completely unacceptable if any agreement was made. But Rubio's also expressed the White House's disappointment in Europe for, I quote, being in hiding during the Iran war. But get away from the specific rhetoric. And what is really clear is American frustration is building because far from capitulating, Iran seems to be actually starting to gain the initiative now. Meanwhile, in southern Lebanon, in the Israel war against Hezbollah, what is clear is that although a week ago they agreed to extend the ceasefire by 45 days, in reality, the war continues apace. Hostilities have erupted. The casualty figures, according to the Lebanese Health Authority, have now gone over 3,000 casualties. And it's pretty clear that Israel's trying to build a buffer zone, potentially up to the Litani River, to protect its northern territories from attack. The danger is that will take some time. And regardless of whatever's agreed as ceasefire, it doesn't look like Israel's going to stop until it's achieved its objectives. So therefore, where does all this leave us with the Iran war? Well, it's pretty clear that there is no end in sight for the war. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. And the evident American frustration probably explains why they're continuing to threaten further military action against Iran if talks don't progress, even though military action doesn't appear to be the answer at all. Meanwhile, far from capitulating, Iran seems to be taking every opportunity to seize the initiative.